about 40 minutes off the coast when I realized something felt wrong. The ocean was flat that morning, glassy and still, and the dive boat cut through it like a blade. The sun was already hot, glinting off every ripple, and the only sound was the rhythmic slap of the hull against the water. I was with two other divers, Caleb and Marissa, friends I'd known for years. We'd planned this trip for months, picked a remote spot from some old dive charts, a site known only as Site 7 on a faded nautical map. Supposedly it was an old shipwreck. No one we knew had ever been there. That was the appeal. Caleb was at the helm, Marissa beside him, leaning on the rail with her hair whipping in the wind. I was sitting on the bench at the stern, checking my gear. My fingers moved automatically over the buckles and clips, the hoses and gauges, but my stomach had been twisting since we left the marina. I told myself it was just nerves. I'd done dozens of dives, but something about going this far out to an unmarked site made my skin crawl. We anchored over the GPS coordinates and killed the engine. The silence that followed was sharp. It was just us, a floating speck in a flat, endless blue. No other boats, no birds, not even the distant hum of shipping lanes. Just water in every direction. We suited up. Tanks clanged against the deck, regulators hissed as we tested airflow. Caleb gave a thumbs up. I forced one back. Then we slipped over the side and let the ocean swallow us. At first, it was beautiful. Sunlight cut down through the water in long, white shafts. Pebbles rose like silver beads, spiraling toward the surface. We descended slowly, equalizing our ears, drifting through the warm upper layers. The water was startlingly clear, visibility stretching far below us in shifting blue gradients. I watched the hull of the boat shrink above us, turn from something solid to a shadow, then vanish as we went deeper. The seafloor appeared as a hazy shape, then sharpened. Sand rippled in pale dunes. A scattering of coral outcroppings rose like knuckles. And there, half buried, was the wreck. It wasn't a ship in any recognizable way anymore. It was more like the suggestion of one. The skeletal frame of the hull lay on its side, rusted to a reddish husk. Plates of corroded metal jutted from the sand like broken ribs. Fish darted through holes and cracks, their scales catching the dim light. We circled the wreck slowly, careful to keep our fins off the bottom. Silt puffed in lazy clouds where our bubbles touched the ceiling. My dive computer read 90 feet. The water here was cooler, darker, and very quiet. I remember thinking it was strange how intact some parts of the wreck were. The water should have chewed this thing down to nothing after decades. But the deeper we went into it, the more it seemed like the sea had been reluctant to touch it at all. No soft corals had grown over the steel. No barnacles clung to it. Just bare, rusted metal. Caleb signaled that he wanted to go inside. I hesitated. I don't like overhead environments on dives, too many ways to get trapped. But Marissa nodded and followed him through a jagged hole where the deck had split. I didn't want to be the one who chickened out, so I went after them. Inside, the water was colder. I felt it immediately, a sudden drop that bit through my wetsuit. The light dimmed to a dusky green. We kicked gently through narrow corridors choked with silt. Our lights sliced through the darkness in tight beams. Old wires hung from the ceiling like cobwebs. It felt wrong in there. Not just eerie, hostile, the kind of wrong your body recognizes even if your mind tries to ignore it. My breathing sounded too loud in my mask. Every kick of my fins felt like trespassing. The pressure of the water pressed in from all sides. Caleb led the way into a compartment that might once have been crew quarters. There were bunks bolted to the walls, the thin metal frames eaten through with rust. A single locker door hung open, swinging slightly in the current. Marissa swam toward it, shining her light inside. She froze. I saw her body go stiff, her fins stop moving. Her light trembled slightly in her hand. I swam up beside her to see what she was looking at. Inside the locker, something was wedged into the corner. At first, I thought it was a piece of old gear, some forgotten tool wrapped in decaying canvas. But the shape resolved as my eyes adjusted. A human skull. It was discolored, yellowed, with scraps of something dark still clinging to it. It sat at an angle, the jaw missing, the eye sockets hollow. But what made my stomach lurch was that it looked wedged there, deliberately, like someone had pressed it into that corner with force. Caleb hovered behind us, light darting between our faces, asking silently what we'd found. Marissa backed away slowly, her breath rasping loud through her regulator. I couldn't look away. The skull looked wrong, not in the way dead things normally do, but in the way it seemed fresh. Not decades old, not softened by the sea. The bone was clean, edges sharp, no sign of sea life picking at it. Then something flickered at the edge of my vision. I spun, shining my light down the corridor we'd come from. Something had moved there. Far down the passage, just beyond the reach of our lights, the water was darker than it should have been. A shadow. It clung to the corner, too solid, too still, and it was watching us. I felt the hair on my neck prickle, even though it was pressed flat by my hood. My chest tightened. My brain screamed to get out. I grabbed Marissa's arm and pointed to the exit. She nodded, eyes wide, and kicked hard toward the way we came. Caleb hesitated, light darting around the shadow, but followed when I shoved him forward. We swam fast, maybe too fast, our fins stirring up clouds of silt. The shadow didn't move. It just hung there, right at the edge of our lights, like it was letting us go. When we burst out of the wreck, the cold current hit me again like a slap. We didn't stop. We kicked for open water, away from the wreck, until it was just a dark shape behind us. I checked my air, half tank. My heart was hammering so hard it threw off my buoyancy. Caleb made the signal to ascend. We all nodded and started to rise. At about 60 feet, something grabbed Marissa. It happened in an instant. 1 second she was beside me. The next she jerked violently downward, her light spinning away. Bubbles exploded from her regulator as she thrashed. I saw a pale shape coil around her leg, slick and fast, and then she was gone, yanked into the darkness below. Caleb lunged after her. I caught his arm and held on with everything I had. His eyes were wild behind his mask. He screamed through his regulator, a burst of frantic bubbles. I shook my head hard, yanked the up one signal with my free hand. He hesitated just long enough for me to drag him with me, kicking upward as hard as I could. Something moved below us. Fast. I didn't see it clearly, just the disturbance it made. Water twisting unnaturally, a pale blur rising then veering off into the dark. The pressure felt like it shifted around us, the water itself recoiling from whatever it was. We didn't stop. We rocketed up too fast, ignoring our computer's screaming warnings about decompression. The fear was louder. The surface burst around us in a roar of air and spray. I ripped out my regulator and gasped. Caleb was shouting Marissa's name, spinning in the water, mask fogged. There was no sign of her. The ocean was flat and empty in every direction. We clawed back onto the boat, collapsed on the deck, ripping off our gear with trembling hands. The anchor line was still taut, disappearing into the blue. Caleb lunged for it like he might dive again, but I tackled him. He fought me, screaming, sobbing, until he collapsed. We waited. We waited for hours, drifting, calling her name, watching the water for bubbles, for movement, for anything. Nothing came back up. The Coast Guard found us near sunset, still anchored over the site. They searched with divers and sonar, no trace. Not of her, not of the wreck. The wreck was gone. They thought we had the coordinates wrong. We showed them our dive computers, the logs. They just shook their heads. Out there, everything looks the same, they said. People get lost. They didn't see what we saw. They didn't see the way the water closed over her like a mouth. They didn't see the shadow watching us from the dark. I haven't been in the ocean since. Caleb tried once, months later. He went out alone. They found his boat drifting, gear scattered, dive computer flashing an empty log. No recorded dive, no depth, no time underwater, just gone. And I know why. I know what's waiting down there. It let me go once. I won't give it another chance. I've done a lot of dives, more than I can count. I've seen reef sharks skim by close enough that I could feel the pressure ripple off their bodies. I've hovered above a trench so deep that the blue faded to black beneath me, like staring into a starless night. But nothing has ever made me feel what I felt 2 days ago. It was supposed to be an easy dive. My buddy Aaron and I had chartered a small boat from a local marina off the coast. He's the one who suggested it. He'd heard from another diver about a submerged rock arch, about 40 feet down, covered in anemones and sea fans, surrounded by schools of parrotfish and wrasse. It sounded perfect. Calm water, no currents to fight, clear visibility. Nothing dangerous, nothing unknown. The water was glass that morning, barely a ripple. The air smelled like salt and sunscreen. We geared up, checked each other's tanks and regulators, and dropped into the water feet first. The first 20 feet down were exactly what we expected. Shafts of sunlight spearing down through turquoise water, schools of silver baitfish flickering around us like sparks. The ocean floor was a pale stretch of sand dotted with coral heads. We followed the reef edge, slow and steady, breathing in rhythm. Everything felt normal, comfortable. At first, I remember the exact second that changed. We were about 35 feet down when the water around us seemed to dim. I thought maybe a cloud passed overhead, but when I glanced up, sunlight was still blazing on the surface. Still bright. The water just shifted, like someone had turned down a dimmer switch. The blues got darker, murkier, as if something massive had drifted between us and the sun. But there was nothing above us. Only that eerie, heavy darkness creeping in. I signaled to Aaron, pointing around us with an open palm. He shrugged, wide-eyed behind his mask, and gave me the okay sign. But I could see his bubbles coming faster now. He felt it too. Something was off. We pressed on, toward the arch. It loomed out of the gloom like a jawbone, curved and craggy, draped in waving sea fans. Normally I'd have been thrilled by how otherworldly it looked, but something in my gut had gone cold. The water was getting colder too. Not just a little thermocline. This was a sharp drop biting through my wetsuit. My dive computer read 59 degrees Fahrenheit. That was nearly 10 degrees colder than it had been on the surface. I glanced back at Aaron again. He was right behind me, but he wasn't looking at the arch anymore. He was staring down into the sand below us. His light swept over it, and that's when I saw it too. Tracks. Deep grooves cut into the seabed, wide and irregular, almost like something heavy had been dragged along. They weren't from a boat anchor, too meandering, and they were fresh. The edges were crisp, the disturbed sand still swirling up in lazy spirals. There were too many of them to count, crisscrossing like something had been pacing, circling. Aaron gave me the what the hell gesture, palm up and shoulders shrugged, and I felt my stomach knot. We should have turned back then. We didn't. We swam under the arch. That's where it was. At first, all I saw was motion, something massive uncoiling from the far side of the arch where the shadow pooled. It didn't swim the way anything should. It folded out of the darkness, limbs stretching and bending in ways that made my vision stutter. Arms, if you could call them that, long and thin, jointed like a person's but ending in webbed claws. And behind them, writhing a curtain of tentacles as long as I was tall, each lined with slick black barbs. Its skin was dark, slick like oil, but it wasn't smooth. It was studded with ridges, like cartilage bones pressing from beneath. And its face. God, its face. It was vaguely human in shape, with a long, angular skull and hollow sunken cheeks, but the mouth stretched back too far, like it had been slit ear to ear. Rows of thin, needle teeth glinted in the beam of my dive light. No nose, just slits. And eyes like coals, burning red, locked on us, watching us, measuring. My body froze, pure shock. My mind screamed to swim, but my limbs wouldn't move. The thing didn't lunge, it didn't chase. It just hovered there in the gloom, half hidden behind the rock, tentacles drifting in slow, serpentine waves. Waiting. Aaron moved first. He bolted, just spun and kicked, finning hard for open water. The sudden motion snapped me out of it, and I went after him, but the creature reacted faster. It unfolded. That's the only word I can use. It unfolded into the water, moving with impossible speed, tentacles snapping out like whips. One of them lashed past me, missing by inches, and hit the sand with enough force to explode it upward in a murky cloud. I saw Aaron's fin get caught, yanked backward, and his body twisted violently. He screamed, or tried to, but it came out as a muffled roar of bubbles. I spun around and grabbed his BCD strap, pulling as hard as I could, kicking furiously. The tentacle let go, and we shot forward, tearing through the silt cloud. My heart was slamming, air roaring through my regulator. We didn't look back. The water around us went black. Not just dark, black like ink. The creature had released something, a thick tar-like cloud that swallowed the light from our torches completely. I couldn't see my own hands, couldn't see Aaron, could only feel his frantic kicks against my side. Then something grabbed me. Not my leg, my whole torso. A band of crushing pressure clamped around my ribs and spun me violently. My regulator nearly ripped out of my mouth. My mask flooded. Panic tore through me. I clawed at it, hands scraping over something slick and cold and ridged. It squeezed harder, ribs creaking, and I knew if it crushed any harder, they'd snap. I jammed my dive knife down into it. The blade barely went in, like stabbing wet rubber, but it was enough. The grip loosened. I kicked off, wrenching free, bubbles blasting around my face. Through the swirling black, I saw a glimpse of it. Its mouth stretched wide, unhinged, teeth like glass needles. And then it shot upward, coiling away into the dark. I found Aaron's arm and latched on, yanking him toward the surface. We didn't care about safety stops or decompression. We just went. The light above grew brighter and brighter until we burst through the surface, gasping, tearing our masks off. The sky was dazzlingly bright. The air felt like fire in my lungs. We clawed our way back to the boat and hauled ourselves aboard like shipwreck survivors, collapsing on the deck, choking and trembling. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Just lay there, staring at the sky, sucking in ragged breaths. My chest throbbed where it had grabbed me. When I finally looked down, I saw deep, livid welts wrapping my torso in the exact shape of those barbed tentacles. Tiny hooks of cartilage were still embedded in my suit, some punched all the way through the neoprene. Aaron's fin was shredded, torn clean through. His ankle was bleeding where one of the barbs had caught him. He kept looking at the water, flinching at every ripple. He didn't say it, but I knew. We both knew. It was still down there. We powered back to shore without a word. Neither of us even rinsed our gear. We just threw it in the bed of my truck and drove, still dripping in our wetsuits. We didn't stop until we were miles inland, parked in silence in a gas station lot. When we finally talked, it didn't make either of us feel better. Aaron said when it grabbed his fin, something else had brushed him. Another tentacle, but thinner, more like a feeler. He swore he felt it probing him, not just grabbing. Like it was testing the shape of him, measuring him. And before it let go, he said he felt a sharp prick like a needle through his boot. His foot was numb for an hour afterward. I can't get that thing's face out of my head. The way it watched us, not like prey, like intruders, like we had wandered into something's territory that we weren't meant to see. That night, I cut my wetsuit off with scissors. The barbs were still stuck in it, black and sharp like fish spines. They burned my fingertips when I touched them, like the faint sting of a jellyfish. I buried the suit behind the shed. I couldn't bring myself to keep it. Aaron hasn't answered my calls since. I don't blame him. If he's trying to pretend it didn't happen, I almost envy him, because I know what I saw. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't some unknown fish or a trick of the light. It was real. It was down there, waiting in that cold blackness beneath the arch, watching. And if it wanted to kill us, it could have, easily. That's the part that keeps hitting me. The worst part. It didn't try to finish us. It could have dragged us down, wrapped us up in those barbed arms, and torn us apart. But it didn't. It let us go. Not because it couldn't kill us, because it didn't want to. Not yet. We anchored the boat about 3 miles off the coast, far enough that the shoreline was just a pale smear on the horizon. The water was unnervingly still that morning, slick and glassy under a heavy gray sky. It made everything feel muffled, like the world had been wrapped in wet cotton. I was with my dive partner, Casey. We'd been planning this trip for weeks, looking to explore an old reef neither of us had visited before. We were both experienced divers, meticulous about safety, so we ran through our pre-dive checks carefully. The silence around us felt heavier than normal, but we didn't comment on it. I just remember standing there with my wetsuit half-zipped, glancing at the endless water, and feeling a faint ripple of unease I couldn't explain. We geared up and slipped into the ocean. The water closed over my head in a rush of cold and quiet. I let my breathing steady as we descended, bubbles spiraling up past my mask. Light thinned quickly as we sank deeper, colors fading to muted blues and grays. The reef rose up out of the gloom, jagged and skeletal, swaying with slow ribbons of kelp. It should have been beautiful, but there were almost no fish, no darting flashes of color, no swarms of movement, just pale corals coated in a thin gray fuzz and long gaps of bare rock. The ocean here felt emptied out. Casey swam ahead, checking her depth gauge, and I followed. We stayed close, scanning the nooks and crevices, trying to ignore the growing sense that we were intruding. Every so often, I caught myself looking over my shoulder, certain something was drifting behind us, but there was never anything there. Just our trail of bubbles twisting toward the surface. After about 40 minutes, we began to ascend. My hands were trembling faintly from the cold and adrenaline as we broke the surface. The sky had gone darker, clouds hanging lower, but the water was still unnaturally flat. Our boat bobbed quietly where we left it. We climbed aboard, hauling off our gear, laughing shakily about how creepy the dive had felt. It was a thin kind of laughter, more to shake off the tension than anything. Casey stripped her wetsuit to her waist and started recording our dive notes. I sat on the bench, sipping water, staring out at the gray horizon. That's when I saw the head. At first, I thought it was a buoy, just a black shape on the water about 30 feet away. Then it moved, a human head bobbing up slowly, turning toward us. Someone was out here. No other boats in sight, no sound but the quiet slap of water. "Casey," I said, low. She followed my gaze. We watched in silence as the figure floated closer. It was a man, wearing a dive mask pushed up on his forehead, the strap twisted. He wasn't swimming, just drifting, letting the swell carry him toward us. Something about him was wrong. His skin looked grayish, mottled. Water beaded on it, but it didn't look wet, more like cold wax. "Hey," Casey called out, hesitant. The man didn't respond. He didn't even blink. He just kept coming, eyes fixed on our boat. A pulse of dread went through me. "We should go," I whispered. But Casey was already moving toward the ladder. "Maybe he's in trouble." "Wait," I hissed. Too late. The man reached the side of our boat with a sudden burst of motion, gripping the rail with pale fingers. He hauled himself up with unnatural strength, water streaming off him in sheets. The smell hit me then, sharp and foul, like rotting meat left out in the sun. Casey stumbled back, gagging. "Jesus." He stepped onto the deck with slow, jerky movements, head cocked. His wetsuit hung loose and torn at the seams, and underneath his skin was bloated in places, stretched thin and gray-green. A dive knife was strapped to his leg, the sheath crusted with salt. "Sir, are you hurt?" Casey managed. He smiled. It was small and strange, lips peeling back too far, teeth gray at the edges. Then he lunged. I screamed as he hit Casey full force, driving her backward into the bench. The sound of her skull cracking against it made my stomach flip. She went limp instantly. I grabbed the nearest thing, one of our oxygen tanks, and swung. The metal clanged off his shoulder. He barely reacted. His head snapped toward me, eyes clouded and empty. I bolted for the cabin, slamming the door, fumbling with the lock. My breath came in shallow bursts, vision swimming. Through the narrow window, I saw him stand over Casey's body. He bent down, slowly, almost gently, and sniffed her hair. Then he started dragging her toward the edge of the boat. Something in me snapped. I yanked open the emergency kit and grabbed the flare gun. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I shoved the cabin door open and shouted, "Let her go!" He froze, head twitching toward me. For a long, awful second, we just stared at each other. His eyes were filmy, pale blue and glazed, but locked right on mine. Then his mouth stretched wider than it should have been, splitting at the corners. I fired. The flare hit his chest and erupted in searing light. He shrieked, not like a man, more like steam ripping through metal, and stumbled back. Flames licked up his wetsuit. He staggered over the side, vanishing with a hiss into the water. Silence crashed down. I dropped the gun and ran to Casey. Her head lolled at a wrong angle, blood matting her hair. My stomach heaved. I couldn't feel a pulse. I was crying and shaking as I pulled the radio from the wall, screaming Mayday into the static until someone answered. My voice sounded far away, tinny, like it wasn't even mine. While I waited for the Coast Guard, I locked the cabin and sat there clutching the flare gun, staring at the door. I kept thinking about the way he moved, jerky but strong, like tendons pulled too tight. And the smell. It clung to everything, sweet and rotten, curling into my throat no matter how hard I swallowed. It took them nearly an hour to reach me. By then, the deck was empty except for Casey's body. No sign of him, no bubbles on the surface, no debris, just flat gray water stretching in every direction. They found deep scratches on the rail where he'd climbed aboard. The metal was gouged like something with claws had grabbed it, though I'd seen only human fingers. The officials asked questions. I answered. They took my statement, my gear, everything. They said there was no record of any other diver in the area. I replay that moment in my head constantly when I first saw him, just a black shape on the water. If we'd started the engine then, if we'd left right away, maybe Casey would still be alive. I don't dive anymore. I can't. But what keeps me awake isn't just what he did, it's what he was. He wasn't drowning, he wasn't asking for help, he was coming for us.